What happens when a kind orphan girl meets a mysterious beggar who isn't who he seems? This is the story of a young woman who had nothing. No parents, no freedom, no hope, but she had one gift that nobody valued. She had a heart full of kindness in a house full of cruelty. Every insult, every chore. Every night she cried herself to sleep, and the family who betrayed her, they were her own blood relatives, treating her like a slave. What happened when the beggar revealed his true identity will shock you. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Lagos, there was a house that looked beautiful from the outside. The walls were painted cream and white, the flowers in the garden bloomed brightly, and the iron gate stood tall and proud. But inside that house, there was no beauty, only bitterness, jealousy, and pain. Faith was a young girl who lived in that house. She was not the daughter of the owners. She was an orphan. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was only 7 years old, and her uncle, Mr. Daniel, had taken her in. At first, Faith thought her uncle's family would love her, but she was wrong. Mrs. Daniel, her uncle's wife, was a woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper heart. She had 2 daughters, Rita and Susan, both older than Faith. From the moment Faith arrived, Mrs. Daniel made it clear that Faith was not part of the family. She was just another mouth to feed. "Faith," Mrs. Daniel's voice echoed through the house one morning. "Where is my tea?" Faith rushed into the kitchen, her bare feet slapping against the cold tiles. "I'm making it now, Ma," she said, her voice soft and respectful. Mrs. Daniel stood by the door, arms folded across her chest. "You're always slow. Do you think we have all day?" "I'm sorry, Ma. Sorry doesn't cook food or wash clothes," Mrs. Daniel snapped. "Hurry up, and after this I want you to sweep the entire compound. Rita and Susan are going out, and I don't want them coming back to a dirty house." Faith nodded quickly. "Yes, Ma." As Mrs. Daniel walked away, Faith let out a shaky breath. She was used to this. The insults, the endless chores, the way they treated her like a servant instead of family. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Rita walked into the kitchen, her high heels clicking loudly. She looked at Faith with disgust. "You're still here? I thought Mama told you to sweep outside." "I'm making her tea first," Faith said quietly, not looking up. Rita smirked. "You know, Faith, you should be grateful we even let you stay here. If it were up to me, you'd be on the streets." Faith said nothing. She had learned long ago that talking back only made things worse. Susan appeared behind Rita laughing. "Rita, leave her alone. She's too busy being a maid to talk." The 2 sisters laughed as they left the kitchen. Faith stood there, gripping the teacup tightly, fighting the urge to cry. She whispered to herself, "One day things will be different, one day." But she didn't know how soon that day would come. Mr. Daniel was a quiet man who rarely spoke to Faith. He spent most of his time at work or locked in his study. When he did speak, it was usually to complain about something Faith had tried to connect with him when she first arrived, hoping he would remember her father, his own brother. But Mr. Daniel always looked away, his face filled with something Faith couldn't name, guilt perhaps, or shame. One evening, Faith was washing dishes when Mr. Daniel walked into the kitchen. He stood there for a moment watching her. "Faith," he said finally. She turned, surprised. "Yes, Uncle?" He opened his mouth as if to say something important, then closed it again. "Nothing, just make sure you lock the doors before you sleep." "Yes, Uncle," Faith said, confused. He walked away, and Faith wondered what he had really wanted to say. Weeks turned into months, and life in the Daniel household remained the same. Faith woke up before sunrise every day, prepared breakfast, washed clothes, cleaned the house, and went to bed late at night. She rarely complained. She had nowhere else to go. The only time Faith felt peace was when she visited her parents' grave. Every month, she would save a few coins from the small amount Mrs. Daniel gave her for market errands, and she would take a bus to the cemetery. She would sit by their graves, talking to them as if they could hear her. "Mama, Papa," she would whisper, "I'm trying to be strong like you taught me, but sometimes it's so hard. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere." One Saturday afternoon, something unusual happened. A sleek black car pulled up in front of the Daniel house. The driver stepped out and opened the door. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses. Mrs. Daniel, who had been sitting in the living room, jumped up when she saw the car. "Rita, Susan, come quickly, we have a visitor." Rita and Susan rushed to the window, their eyes wide with excitement. "Mama, who is that?" Rita asked. "I don't know, but he looks rich," Mrs. Daniel said, quickly fixing her hair. "Girls, go and change into something nice, quickly." Faith was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion. She peeked through the door and saw the man walking toward the house. He knocked, and Mrs. Daniel opened it with a wide smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to our home," Mrs. Daniel said, her voice suddenly sweet and polite. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice deep and calm. "I'm looking for a family that lives around here. I was told this is the address." "Please, come in, Mrs. Daniel said, stepping aside. "Sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" "Water is fine, thank you," the man said, sitting on the sofa. Mrs. Daniel turned to Faith, who was still standing by the kitchen door. "Faith, bring water for our guest and make sure it's cold." Faith nodded and hurried to get the water. As she handed the glass to the man, their eyes met for a brief moment. He smiled at her, a small, kind smile that caught her off guard. "Thank you," he said softly. Faith nodded and stepped back, her heart beating a little faster. No one ever thanked her for anything. Rita and Susan came into the living room, dressed in their best clothes. They sat down, trying to look elegant and attractive. Mrs. Daniel cleared her throat. "Sir, these are my two daughters, Rita and Susan. They are both educated and well-mannered." The man glanced at them briefly, then looked away. "I see." Mrs. Daniel frowned slightly, sensing his lack of interest. "So, what brings you here, sir?" "I'm looking for a young lady," the man said, taking a sip of water. "I was told she lives in this area. Her name is Faith." The room fell silent. Mrs. Daniel's smile froze on her face. Rita and Susan exchanged confused glances. "Faith?" Mrs. Daniel said slowly, her voice losing its sweetness. "You mean the girl in the kitchen?" "Yes," the man said, his tone firm. "I'd like to speak with her." Mrs. Daniel's face twisted with confusion and anger. "Sir, I don't understand. Faith is... she's just a relative we're helping. She's not someone important." The man stood up, his expression unreadable. "Where is she?" "I'm here, sir," Faith said quietly. Stepping forward, the man turned to her, his eyes softening. "Faith, I've heard about you. I'd like to speak with you privately, if that's okay." Faith's heart pounded. She didn't know who this man was or why he wanted to talk to her. She looked at Mrs. Daniel, who was staring at her with a mix of shock and fury. "Sir, with all due respect," Mrs. Daniel said, her voice tight. "Faith is under my care. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." The man's jaw tightened. "Very well, Faith, I came here to ask for your hand in marriage." The room exploded with gasps and whispers. Rita's mouth fell open. Susan looked like she had been slapped. Mrs. Daniel's face turned red. "Marriage?" Mrs. Daniel shouted. "Sir, this must be a mistake. Faith is... she's nothing special. Look at her. She doesn't even have proper clothes." The man's eyes flashed with anger. "I know exactly who she is, and I've made my decision." Faith stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. Why would a man like this want to marry her? It didn't make sense. Mrs. Daniel's mind raced. She didn't want Faith to have anything good, but an idea formed in her head, a cruel, twisted idea. She forced a smile. "Sir, if you truly want Faith, then we can arrange it, but we need time to prepare." The man nodded. "I'll return in 1 week." As he left, Mrs. Daniel turned to Faith, her eyes cold. "You think you're special now, don't you?" Faith shook her head. "No, Ma, I don't understand what just happened." "Neither do I," Mrs. Daniel hissed, "but don't get too comfortable. This could still go very wrong for you." Rita stepped forward, her face twisted with jealousy. "How is this possible? How can a man like that want someone like you?" "I don't know," Faith whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Susan laughed bitterly. "Maybe he's blind, or stupid, or both." "Enough," Mrs. Daniel snapped. "All of you, go to your rooms. I need to think." That night, Faith couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mat, staring at the ceiling. Who was that man? Why did he want to marry her? She had never seen him before in her life. The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. In the next room, Mrs. Daniel, Rita, and Susan were having a different conversation. "Mama, this doesn't make sense," Rita said, pacing back and forth. "Why would a rich man want Faith?" "I don't know," Mrs. Daniel said, her voice cold. "But I don't trust it. Something is not right." "Maybe we should stop the marriage," Susan suggested. Mrs. Daniel shook her head. "No, if we do that, people will talk. They'll ask questions. It's better to let it happen. Besides, if he turns out to be a fraud or a madman, it's Faith who will suffer, not us." Rita smiled slowly. "So you're saying we should let her go?" "Exactly," Mrs. Daniel said. "Let her marry him. Whatever happens to her after that is not our problem." The next morning, Mrs. Daniel called Faith into the living room. Rita and Susan were there too, their faces filled with false concern. "Faith," Mrs. Daniel began, her voice dripping with fake kindness, "that man who came yesterday, he's very interested in you." "I don't know why, Ma," Faith said honestly. "Well, neither do we," Susan muttered under her breath. Mrs. Daniel shot her a look, then continued, "We've decided to accept his proposal. You will marry him next week." Faith's eyes widened. "But Ma, I don't even know him." "That doesn't matter," Mrs. Daniel said sharply. "He wants you, and we've agreed you should be grateful. A girl like you doesn't get many opportunities." "But Ma, but nothing," Mrs. Daniel's voice rose. "Do you think you have a choice here? Do you think anyone else will want you? You have no education, no skills, nothing. This man is your only chance at a better life. Don't be foolish." Faith felt a wave of fear wash over her. She wanted to protest, to ask questions, but she knew it was pointless. No one in this house cared about what she wanted. "Yes, Ma," Faith said quietly. "Good," Mrs. Daniel said, standing up. "Now go. We have a lot to prepare." The days leading up to the wedding were strange. Faith barely saw the man again. He sent messages through a driver, confirming the date and time. Mrs. Daniel seemed unusually eager to get everything done quickly. She didn't buy Faith a proper wedding dress or organize any celebration. It was as if she wanted the whole thing over with as fast as possible. Faith tried to push away her doubts, but something about the situation felt wrong. Why would a man who looked so wealthy and refined want to marry a poor orphan like her? Why hadn't he tried to spend time with her, to get to know her? The questions swirled in her mind day and night. One evening, 3 days before the wedding, Faith was folding clothes when Rita came into her room. She leaned against the doorframe, watching Faith with a strange expression. "Faith," Rita said, her voice softer than usual. Faith looked up, surprised. "Yes?" Rita hesitated, then sat on the edge of the mat. "Are you scared?" Faith didn't know how to answer. She nodded slowly. Rita looked down at her hands. "I would be too." For a moment, Faith saw something in Rita's eyes that looked almost like sympathy, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Rita, do you think this is a mistake?" Faith asked quietly. Rita stood up, her face hardening. "I think you should do what Mama says, that's all." She left the room, and Faith was alone again with her fears. On the morning of the wedding, Mrs. Daniel handed Faith a simple white dress. It was old and slightly torn at the hem, but Mrs. Daniel acted as if it were a gift. "Here, put this on," she said. Faith took the dress and went to her small room. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror on the wall. Her reflection stared back at her, tired and uncertain. She had lost weight over the past week from worry and lack of sleep. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "God, if you're listening," she whispered, "please let this be a good thing. Please don't let this man hurt me. I've been hurt enough." She put on the dress and walked out to the living room. Mrs. Daniel looked her up and down with a critical eye. "You'll do," she said curtly. "Let's go." The ceremony was small and quiet. There were no decorations, no music, no celebration, just a few witnesses and a pastor who rushed through the vows as if he had somewhere else to be. The venue was a small chapel on the outskirts of town, dusty and poorly lit. Faith stood beside the man, her hands trembling. He was dressed simply, in clothes that looked worn and slightly too large for him. His face was partially hidden under a cap, and he walked with a slight limp. Faith noticed these details, but said nothing. She was too frightened to speak. When the pastor asked if she took this man as her husband, Faith's voice was barely a whisper. "I do." The man looked at her and smiled gently. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. But Faith was afraid, terribly afraid. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the man took Faith's hand. His grip was surprisingly strong and steady. "Let's go," he said softly. They walked out of the small chapel, and Faith expected to see a modest car waiting, maybe an old taxi or a borrowed vehicle, but what she saw made her stop in her tracks. A gleaming white limousine sat parked outside, the driver standing beside it with the door open. The car looked completely out of place in the dusty street. Faith's breath caught in her throat. "Sir, I don't understand." The man smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. "You will?" "Get in." Faith climbed into the car, her mind spinning. The interior was luxurious, with soft leather seats and polished wood panels. She had never been in a car like this before. She sat stiffly, afraid to touch anything. The man sat beside her, and as the car pulled away, he reached up and removed the cap he had been wearing. Then he straightened his posture, and suddenly he looked completely different. The limp was gone. His shoulders were broad and confident. His face, no longer hidden, was handsome and strong. "My name is Michael," he said, his voice no longer weak but powerful and clear, "and I'm not who you think I am." Faith stared at him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned back, his expression serious. "I came to your uncle's house for a reason, Faith. A reason that has nothing to do with love. At least, not at first." "I don't understand," Faith whispered, her voice shaking. "You will," Michael said, "but first, let me tell you a story. A story that began many years ago." Faith listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Michael's voice was calm, but filled with pain as he began. "Years ago, my father was a successful businessman. He had built a trading company from nothing, working day and night to provide for our family. He was an honest man, a good man. He believed in trust and partnership." Michael paused, his jaw tightening. "My father had a partner, a man he trusted with everything. They had been friends since childhood. They built the business together, shared everything equally. That man's name was Daniel." Faith's eyes widened. "My uncle?" Michael nodded slowly. "Yes, your Uncle Daniel. My father and he worked together for 15 years. The business grew, became very successful. They had offices in 3 cities, employed over 100 people. My father thought they would be partners for life." Michael's voice grew harder, but Daniel got greedy. He wanted everything for himself. He started forging documents, stealing money from the company accounts. When my father discovered what was happening, he confronted Daniel. "Do you know what your uncle did?" Faith shook her head, tears already forming in her eyes. "He framed my father for fraud," Michael said, his voice cold. "He created fake records, bribed officials, paid people to lie in court. My father lost everything. The business, his reputation, our family home. We became poor overnight. My mother fell sick from the stress. My father couldn't bear the shame. He died of a heart attack 2 years later. I was only 12 years old." Faith felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this." "Of course you didn't," Michael said, his voice softening slightly. "You were just a child yourself, and from what I learned, your father was different from his brother. Your father was a good man." Faith nodded, wiping her tears. "He was. He always told me to be kind to people, no matter how they treated me." Michael looked at her with something like respect in his eyes. "He taught you well. That kindness is what saved you." "What do you mean?" Faith asked. Michael continued his story. "After my father died, I made a vow. I vowed to rebuild everything Daniel had destroyed. I worked hard, studied, started my own business. By the time I was 25, I was more successful than my father had ever been. But I never forgot what Daniel did to my family. I never forgot." The car was moving through the city now, past tall buildings and busy streets. Faith watched but didn't really see anything. She was lost in Michael's words. "I wanted revenge," Michael said honestly. "I wanted to destroy Daniel the way he destroyed my father. But I'm not like him. I couldn't just attack him blindly. I needed to understand what kind of man he had become. So I decided to test him, to test his entire household." "That's why you disguised yourself," Faith said, understanding dawning. "Yes, Michael confirmed. I pretended to be poor, broken, unworthy. I limped, wore old clothes, acted weak. I wanted to see how they would treat someone they thought was beneath them. I wanted to see if there was any goodness left in that family, any trace of the friendship my father once believed in. He turned to look directly at Faith, and I saw everything, Faith. I saw how they treated you, like you were nothing, like you didn't matter. Your aunt, your cousins, even your uncle, who barely looked at you, they were cruel, heartless. Faith looked down at her hands, shame washing over her. But you, Michael continued, his voice gentle now, you were different. When I came to the house that first day, pretending to be a stranger, you brought me water without hesitation. You looked me in the eye. You treated me like a human being. Later, when I came back in my disguise as a poor beggar, you were the only one who showed me kindness. You offered me a seat. You asked if I was hungry. You were the only one in that entire house who saw me as a person, not as someone to use or despise. Faith remembered that day. A week before the wedding announcement, a beggar had come to the house. Mrs. Daniel had shouted at him to leave. Rita had thrown water at him, but Faith had felt sorry for him. She had given him some bread and a cup of water. That was you? She whispered. Michael nodded. That was me, and I knew then that you didn't belong in that place. You were nothing like them. You were pure, kind, genuine. So I made a decision. I would take you away from there. I would give you the life you deserve. The car pulled up to a massive gate. Faith looked out the window and gasped. Beyond the gate was a sprawling mansion surrounded by gardens and fountains. It looked like something out of a dream, like the pictures in the magazines Rita and Susan used to look at. This is my home, Michael said, and now it's yours too. Faith couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. The gate opened automatically and the car drove through. As they got closer to the mansion, Faith saw the details. The building was 3 stories tall, painted white with blue trim. There were balconies with flowers, large windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun, and a fountain in the center of the circular driveway with water dancing in the light. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. The driver opened the door, and Michael stepped out first, then extended his hand to Faith. She took it, her legs shaking as she stood. She felt like she might faint. A woman in a neat blue uniform approached them, smiling warmly. "Welcome home, sir." "And welcome, madam." "This is Mrs. Adeola," Michael said. "She manages the house. If you need anything at all, she'll help you." Mrs. Adeola took Faith's hand gently. Her touch was warm and motherly. "Come, my dear, you must be tired. Let me show you to your room." Faith followed her inside, her eyes wide with wonder. The entrance hall was enormous, with a crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. The floors were polished marble, so shiny Faith could see her reflection. The walls were decorated with beautiful paintings in gold frames. A curved staircase led to the upper floors, covered with a deep red carpet. "This way, madam," Mrs. Adeola said, leading her up the stairs. Faith climbed slowly, her hand trailing along the smooth wooden banister. She felt like she was in a dream. Like at any moment, she would wake up back in her small room at her uncle's house. Mrs. Adeola led her down a hallway to a set of double doors. She pushed them open, and Faith stepped inside. The room was the most beautiful thing Faith had ever seen. There was a huge bed with a carved wooden frame covered in soft white sheets and pillows that looked like clouds. Heavy blue curtains hung at the windows. There was a dressing table with a large mirror, a wardrobe that took up an entire wall, and a sitting area with a small sofa and chairs. "This is your room, madam," Mrs. Adeola said. "The bathroom is through that door. Your clothes are in the wardrobe. If you need anything at all, just press this button." She pointed to a small button on the wall near the bed. "I'll come right away." Faith walked slowly into the room, touching things gently as if they might disappear. She opened the wardrobe and saw rows of dresses, skirts, blouses, all in her size, all new. How did he know my size?" she asked. Mrs. Adeola smiled. "Mr. Michael is very thorough. He wanted everything to be perfect for you." Faith went to the window and looked out. She could see the garden stretching out below, with paths winding through flowers and trees. In the distance, she could see a swimming pool, its water blue and inviting. When Mrs. Adeola left, Faith sat on the edge of the bed and covered her face with her hands. Tears poured down her cheeks, tears of relief. disbelief and gratitude. She sobbed, her body shaking with the release of years of pain and fear. "Thank you, God," she whispered through her tears. "Thank you. I don't understand why, but thank you." She lay back on the bed, sinking into the soft mattress. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Over the next few weeks, Faith slowly adjusted to her new life. Michael was kind and patient. He never forced her to do anything. He gave her space, freedom, and respect. He showed her around the mansion, introduced her to the staff, and made sure she felt comfortable. "Faith," he said one morning at breakfast, "I want you to understand something. This marriage, I know it started in an unusual way. I don't expect you to love me. I don't expect anything from you except that you allow yourself to be happy." Faith looked at him, confused. "I don't understand." Michael set down his coffee cup. "I brought you here to save you from that house, from that life. But I also did it because I saw something in you: kindness, strength, dignity. You deserve to be treated well. Whether you choose to stay here as my wife or simply as someone under my protection, that's up to you. There's no pressure." Faith felt tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry so easily these days. "You've given me so much. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay anything," Michael said firmly. "Just live, learn, grow. That's all I want." Michael arranged for Faith to continue her education. She had only finished secondary school before her parents died. Now, he enrolled her in a university program, hired tutors to help her, and encouraged her to pursue her interests. Faith discovered she loved business. She attended classes, studied hard, and began to understand how companies worked, how money moved, how to invest and plan. Michael was impressed by how quickly she learned. "You have a sharp mind," he told her one evening as they reviewed some of her assignments. "You could run a company one day if you wanted." Faith laughed. "Me? Run a company?" "Why not?" Michael said, his expression serious. "Don't underestimate yourself, Faith. You're smarter and stronger than you know." One evening, about 3 months after the wedding, Michael asked Faith to meet him in his study. She knocked softly on the door and entered. Michael was sitting at his large desk, and there was a folder in front of him. "Faith, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat, curious and slightly nervous. Michael pushed the folder across the desk to her. "I want you to open this." Faith opened the folder slowly. Inside were documents, property deeds, bank statements, and legal papers. She read through them, her eyes growing wider with each page. They were all in her name. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. "These are yours, Faith. 2 properties in Lagos, 1 in Abuja. Investment accounts, business shares. Everything is in your name alone, not joint, just yours." Faith looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time, this man who had saved her, who asked nothing in return, who gave her dignity when she had none. "Michael, why are you really doing all of this?" Michael was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Because someone should have done it for my father. Because kindness should be rewarded, not punished. And because, Faith, I've come to care about what happens to you." Something shifted in Faith's heart at those words. She realized that over these months she had also come to care about Michael. Not because of his wealth or what he had given her, but because of who he was: patient, kind, strong, honest. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Michael smiled. "You're welcome." Months passed, and Faith continued to grow and heal. The wounds from years of abuse slowly started to fade. She learned to smile again, to laugh, to dream. She made friends at university. She started a small online business selling handmade jewelry, using the skills her mother had taught her years ago. The business grew, and Faith felt proud of herself. "I wish she could have seen this," Michael said one night as they sat in the garden under the stars. "I wish she could have known that everything turned out okay." "She knows," Faith said gently. "I believe they watch over us. Your mother, my parents, they see us." Michael looked at her, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding. A connection deeper than either had expected. One night, Michael took Faith's hand. "Faith, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked. When I brought you here, it was for justice, for revenge in a way, though not against you. But now it's different. You're not just someone I saved. You've become important to me. I care about you. I think I might be falling in love with you." Faith's heart beat faster. She had been feeling the same way, but was afraid to admit it. "Michael, You don't have to say anything," Michael said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. There's no pressure. You're free to—" "I think I love you too," Faith interrupted, her voice clear and sure. Michael stared at her, hope lighting up his face. "Really?" Faith nodded, tears in her eyes. "You saved me. You gave me everything. But more than that, you showed me what it means to be treated with respect and kindness. You made me believe I was worth something. How could I not love you?" Michael pulled her into his arms, and for the first time, Faith felt truly home, but there was still one thing Faith needed to do, one place she needed to visit, one ghost she needed to lay to rest. "Michael," she said one morning over breakfast, "I want to go back to the village." Michael looked at her, concerned. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Faith said firmly. "I need to visit my parents' grave. I need to tell them that I'm okay. And I need to face my uncle's family. Not with anger, but with peace." Michael studied her face. "You've changed so much, Faith. You're stronger now." "I am," Faith agreed. "And it's time to close that chapter." Michael nodded. "Then I'll take you." "When do you want to go?" "This weekend, Faith said. "I'm ready." On Saturday morning, Faith dressed carefully. She chose a simple but elegant blue dress, one of the ones Michael had bought for her. She styled her hair and put on light makeup. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked confident, beautiful, strong. Michael drove them to the village in one of his cars, a sleek black Mercedes. As they drove through the familiar streets, Faith felt her heart racing. She hadn't seen her uncle's family in almost a year. They stopped first at the cemetery. Michael waited in the car while Faith walked to her parents' grave. The headstone was simple, with their names and dates carved into the stone. Faith knelt down and placed the flowers she had brought. "Mama, Papa," she said softly, "I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. So much has happened. I want you to know that I'm okay now, more than okay. I'm happy. I found someone who treats me the way you taught me people should be treated. I'm living the kind of life you wanted for me." She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I never forgot what you taught me," she continued. "You said to always be kind, even to people who hurt you. You said to forgive, not for them, but for myself. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to forgive them. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace." She stood up, feeling lighter somehow. "I love you both, and I know you're proud of me." As she walked back to the car, Michael got out and held her. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Faith said, wiping her tears. "I'm ready now." They drove to the Daniel house. The black car pulled up in front, and immediately curtains began to twitch. Neighbors came out to see who had arrived in such an expensive vehicle. Faith stepped out, and there were audible gasps. She looked completely different. Her hair was styled beautifully, her dress was elegant, and she carried herself with a confidence that hadn't been there before Mrs. Daniel was sitting outside when she saw the car. Her eyes widened in shock. She stood up slowly, her mouth hanging open. "Faith?" Faith smiled calmly. "Hello, Aunt." Rita and Susan came running out, their mouths hanging open. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The girl they had tormented, the girl they had mocked and abused, was standing before them, looking like she belonged in a magazine. What? What are you doing here?" Mrs. Daniel stammered, her voice shaking slightly. "I came to see you," Faith said, her voice steady and calm, "and to say some things that need to be said." A small crowd had begun to gather. Neighbors who remembered Faith, who had seen how the Daniel family treated her, watched with curiosity. Mr. Daniel appeared at the door, his face pale. When he saw Faith, he froze. For a moment, their eyes met, and Faith saw something flash across his face, fear. "Faith," he said weakly, "you look well." "I am well, Uncle," Faith replied. "Very well, in fact." Mrs. Daniel found her voice again, though it had lost its usual harshness. "We didn't expect to see you. After the wedding, we thought you would be busy with your new life." "I have been," Faith said, but I felt it was important to come back, to face the past before I move forward completely." Rita stepped forward, trying to force a smile. "Faith, you look so different. Marriage must be treating you well." "It is," Faith said simply. Susan looked at the car, then at Michael, who was leaning against it, watching quietly. Is that your husband?" "Yes," Faith said. "That's Michael." Mrs. Daniels' eyes narrowed as she studied Michael. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. "He looks different from the man at the wedding." Faith smiled slightly. "Many things are different from how they appeared at the wedding, Aunt." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Mrs. Daniels shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Well, since you're here, would you like to come inside, have some tea?" "No, thank you," Faith said. "I won't be long. I just came to say a few things." The neighbors pressed closer, eager to hear. Mrs. Daniel looked around nervously. "Faith, perhaps we should discuss this inside, privately." "No," Faith said firmly. "What I have to say can be said here. These people knew me. They saw how I was treated. They deserve to hear this too." Mrs. Daniel's face flushed red. "Faith, don't be disrespectful." "I'm not being disrespectful," Faith said. "I'm being honest. For years, you treated me like I was nothing. You made me sleep on a mat in a storage room. You gave me torn clothes while Rita and Susan wore new dresses. You fed me leftovers while the rest of you ate fresh food. You made me work from dawn until night, doing all the cooking, cleaning, washing. And through it all, you told me I should be grateful." Mrs. Daniel opened her mouth to protest, but Faith continued. "You mocked me when I cried for my parents. You laughed at me when I was sick. You told me I was worthless, that no one would ever want me. Do you remember all of this, Aunt?" Mrs. Daniel looked away, unable to meet Faith's eyes. Rita and Susan stood silent, their faces burning with shame. "I remember," Faith said, her voice breaking slightly. "I remember every single day, every insult, every moment of cruelty. And for a long time, I believed what you told me. I believed I was worthless." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained strong. "But I was wrong to believe you, and you were wrong to treat me that way. I wasn't worthless. I was never worthless. I was a child who had lost her parents, who needed love and care, and instead you gave me pain and suffering." Mr. Daniel finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Faith, it wasn't supposed to be like that." Faith turned to him, and for a moment her expression softened. "Uncle, you knew my father. You were brothers. When I first came here, I hoped you would love me the way he would have loved your children if something had happened to you, but you just looked away. You let your wife and daughters treat me like a slave, and you said nothing." Mr. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Faith." "I know about what you did," Faith said quietly. "I know about Michael's father. I know about the business, the lies, the betrayal. I know everything." Mr. Daniel's face went white. Mrs. Daniel looked confused. "What is she talking about, Daniel?" But Mr. Daniel couldn't speak. He staggered back, leaning against the wall for support. Michael stepped forward then, walking to stand beside Faith. He removed his sunglasses, and Mr. Daniel's eyes widened in recognition. "You," Mr. Daniel breathed. You're James's son." "Yes," Michael said, his voice cold. "I'm James's son, the son of the man you destroyed, the man whose death you caused." Mrs. Daniel looked between them in confusion. "Daniel, what is he talking about?" "Your husband," Michael said, turning to her. "Ruined my father's life. They were business partners, friends since childhood. But your husband got greedy. He stole from the company, framed my father for fraud, and took everything. My father lost his business, his reputation, his health. He died of a broken heart, and my mother followed him a few years later. Your husband did that." The crowd murmured in shock. Mrs. Daniel looked at her husband, her face pale. "Daniel, is this true?" Mr. Daniel said nothing. His silence was answer enough. "I came back to this place," Michael continued, "to see what kind of man Daniel had become, to see if there was any conscience left, any goodness. I disguised myself as a poor man, a beggar, to test your family's character. And I saw everything. I saw how you treated Faith. I saw your cruelty, your pride, your complete lack of compassion." He put his arm around Faith's shoulders. "But I also saw Faith. I saw her kindness in the midst of your cruelty. She was the only one in your entire household who treated me like a human being. She gave me water, offered me food, spoke to me with respect, and that's when I knew she didn't belong here. That's when I decided to save her." Rita found her voice. "So this was all, what, revenge?" "It started as a way to expose the truth," Michael said, "but it became something more. Faith deserved better than this life. She deserved dignity, respect, opportunity, and now she has all of that." Faith took a deep breath. "I came here today not to humiliate you or to boast about my new life. I came to tell you that despite everything, despite all the pain you caused me, I forgive you." Mrs. Daniels' head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you," Faith repeated, "not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger and bitterness will only poison my own life. My parents taught me to forgive, and so I do." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. Money to help with the house repairs. I noticed the roof is leaking, the fence is broken. Use this to fix it." Mrs. Daniels stared at the envelope but didn't take it. Faith placed it on the small table beside the door. "I'm not doing this to make myself feel superior," Faith continued. "I'm doing it because it's right. Because despite everything, you are still my uncle's family, and my father would have wanted me to help family, even family that hurt me." Mr. Daniel finally moved. He walked toward Faith, his steps unsteady. "Faith, I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did to Michael's father, what I allowed to happen to you, I'm not a good man." "No," Faith agreed gently. "You're not. But you can choose to be better. It's not too late to change." Mr. Daniel broke down then, sobbing openly. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. To you, Michael, to your father's memory, to Faith. I was weak, I was greedy, I destroyed lives, and I have to live with that forever." Michael's expression didn't soften. "My father can't forgive you because he's dead, because of you. But I want you to know that karma is real. You may not have lost everything the way my father did, but you've lost your dignity. You've lost respect. Everyone here now knows what kind of man you are." The neighbors murmured, looking at Mr. Daniel with disgust and disappointment. Faith touched Michael's arm gently. "That's enough. We've said what we came to say." Faith turned to Rita and Susan. "I hope you both find happiness. Real happiness, not the kind that comes from putting others down. Learn from your father's mistakes. Be better than he was." Susan spoke up. "Faith, we were terrible to you. I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I mean it." Faith nodded. "Thank you for saying that." She turned back to Mrs. Daniel. "Aunt, I hope one day you'll understand that kindness isn't weakness, that treating people well doesn't make you less powerful. It makes you more human." Mrs. Daniel finally picked up the envelope from the table. "Faith, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Faith said. "Just think about the choices you've made and the person you want to be going forward." Faith took one last look at the house where she had suffered so much. It looked smaller now, less intimidating. "Goodbye," she said simply. She and Michael walked back to the car. The crowd parted for them, watching in awed silence. As they got into the car, Faith heard one elderly woman say to her neighbor, "That girl has a good heart. She gave them more faith than they deserved." Another replied, "That's why God blessed her. Good things come to good people eventually." As they drove away, Faith looked back one last time. She saw her uncle standing in the yard, his shoulders shaking with sobs. She saw Rita and Susan looking lost and confused, and she saw Mrs. Daniel staring after the car, the envelope clutched in her hands. Thank you so much for watching and joining me on this emotional journey. I appreciate your time and attention, and I hope that this story has left you thinking about the important lessons we can all learn from Faith's experience. Her transformation from a broken, abused orphan to a confident, successful woman shows us that our circumstances don't define us, our character does. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between revenge and forgiveness? How did you handle it? What do you think about Faith's decision to help the family that hurt her? Share your stories with me. I'll be there to read them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging and thought-provoking stories. Your support helps me bring even more stories like this to life. Remember, no matter what you're going through, no matter how people treat you, your worth is not determined by others' opinions. You are valuable, you are important, you deserve dignity and respect. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Until next time, stay safe and remain blessed.